From winding back roads to weathered front porches, this is Grounded in Granite, a podcast about the people and places rooted in the Granite State. I'm Jason Schreiber. I've called this state home my whole life, and for more than 30 years as a journalist, I've had the privilege of telling the quiet, powerful stories that live in our small towns and everyday lives, from the seacoast to the Great North Woods. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's this. In New Hampshire, every person and every place has a story to tell. Thanks for joining me. Let's get started. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Grounded in Granite. I am joined today by Dan Ellingwood, who is a wildlife biologist here. We're actually here at the New Hampshire Fish and Game office in Keene, New Hampshire. And we're here today to talk about turkey, since Thanksgiving is right around the corner, and we're all getting ready for our Thanksgiving feast. And usually the bird is the star of the show, at least for most of us at our Thanksgiving dinner. But there's an interesting story behind wild turkeys here in New Hampshire, because there was a time when we did not have turkeys roaming around and stopping traffic, which happened to me on my way here, actually, to Keene. There was a time when the turkeys vanished from overhunting, and these are things that Dan will be able to get into. But there was an effort to bring the turkeys back to New Hampshire, and in the 70s, and it turned out to be, from what I understand, to be one of the most successful wildlife stories in New Hampshire history. So I think a lot of people don't realize the story of New Hampshire's wild turkey population. So Dan is an expert in this area. I certainly am not. So I figured we'll hear what he has to say and sort of give us some of the background, and we'll have a better understanding as we prepare to eat turkeys. But Dan, if you can kind of start with some of your background here. What is a wildlife biologist? Because some of us might not really know exactly what your role is at Fish and Game. So if you can kind of explain what you do, and then we'll kind of get into the turkey talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
So I actually started as a biologist just this past January, so I'm a little less than a year in and still figuring out what exactly all the roles entail. But
Yeah.
broad overview, the position is it's sort of 50-50 for me, regional biologist, and then turkey biologist. And some of my peers have similar roles with other species focus. So we've got I'm a turkey project leader. We've got a bear project leader, a moose project leader, deer project leader, and so on and so forth. And this is within the wildlife game division. And
Okay.
the regional biologist responsibilities are sort of a little bit of everything depending on the season, answering calls and inquiries from the general public, doing some outreach, providing technical assistance for nuisance wildlife situations as an example, and then a lot of different seasonal surveys specific to different species of interest, keeping
Hmm.
a sort of a pulse on how
Hmm.
different wildlife species are doing on New Hampshire's landscape.
Okay.
So working out of the Region 4 office here in Keene, my responsibilities are primarily focused in Southwest New Hampshire, and then I have peers at other regional offices who carry some of those
Hmm.
similar roles and responsibilities.
And I know, so your dad worked for Fish and Game for many, many years. It sounds like you kind of followed in his footsteps. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that, and what, how he may have influenced your decision to take this career path?
Yeah, so he
I mean,
started as a deer biologist working in the state of
okay.
Connecticut, but
Hmm.
most of his career was here in New Hampshire, starting in the early 90s,
Hmm.
up until just a few years ago when he retired, again working in the wildlife division.
Hmm.
And certainly his interests, I'm sure, helped to shape my own
Yeah.
interests growing up, and in my own career path,
Yeah.
almost certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. So so you said you're turkey project leader. Is that what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
that's the title.
That's the
Yep.
title. Okay. It's kind of a cool title to have, I guess. So, and we've got a turkey right behind us, which is a fantastic backdrop, I guess. Um, so can you talk about the population and what some of the history of how the turkeys kind of disappeared, and then how we brought them back?
Yeah, sure.
If,
So turkeys, of course, are native to New Hampshire, New England's landscape. I think they were a relied upon resource by Native Americans, were probably
Right.
centuries prior to European arrival. Um, the first European colonizers um, also relied heavily on the turkeys as a vital food source,
Mm,
and due to unregulated hunting,
mm,
both for market and for sustenance, as well as pretty dramatic landscape changes that
mhm.
occurred on in New Hampshire and New England as a whole, and many parts of the
So like
country.
land clearing and that
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
thing was kind of disrupting
Yeah,
habitat.
so deforestation,
Yeah.
making way for agriculture, primarily crops, and in New Hampshire, livestock.
Okay.
Sheep farming was huge, and we
Yeah.
still see remnants of those old farms in the
Hmm.
the stone walls that crisscross New Hampshire's landscape.
Hmm.
So yeah, that
So,
deforestation combined
hmm.
with unregulated harvest, it was the mid 1850s, turkeys were all but
Hmm.
extirpated from New Hampshire. Was
Hmm.
last reported observation of turkey was 1854 in the town of Ware in the state of New Hampshire.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So do you know how um, extensive, how big the population was before they disappeared? Do you know? I don't know if that's something you would know, like how large it was at the time, or maybe the current state.
Likely not
Okay.
as high as it is
Is now
now,
okay.
but
Yeah.
certainly, I mean, so today's population estimates were sitting somewhere around 45 to
Hmm.
50,000 turkeys in the state, and
Wow.
that's a rough estimate, more of an index for
Hmm.
tracking population change,
Okay.
based on some of the annual measurements that we take of the turkey's population. And of course, turkeys are tough to count, so we don't
Hmm.
know exactly
Oh
how
yeah.
many there are, but roughly 50,000. There probably weren't that many, just because New Hampshire's landscape was predominantly mature forest,
Hmm.
and prior to European colonization, and turkeys rely on a variety of different forest types, openings,
Hmm.
young forest as well as mature forest, to meet their different seasonal needs. So because New Hampshire's
Hmm.
landscape was largely mature forest, likely it
Hmm.
wasn't supporting the number of turkeys that it was now, but
Hmm.
certainly tens of thousands.
Okay. So then so mid 1850s, they're basically gone. So then what happened? How did it come to be that there was this effort to get them back in the state?
Yeah, so
Because
I mean, first and foremost, our forest structure and landscape has dramatically changed again
mm,
since those initial deforestation for agricultural interests,
mm,
as
right,
agricultural interests shifted to the Midwest,
mhm,
primarily more fertile ground, and sustenance was no longer the focus of every family. So
right,
you weren't you weren't seeing the expanses of oh, you saw a lot of abandonment of farms starting in
mhm,
the late 1800s, early
yeah,
1900s,
true.
and the regeneration of forests, um, just through natural occurrence as a result of that.
Mm.
Um,
So then what you said you were kind of saying earlier. So the 60s and 1960s, that there was an attempt to bring in wild turkeys, but then that I guess failed. Is
yeah,
that what
yeah.
happened?
So I mean, this story in New Hampshire, the wild turkey, I think, as I already mentioned, isn't
Hmm.
necessarily unique to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
It was happening across all New England and a lot
Hmm.
of states um, across the country.
So the first attempt
Yeah,
to bring them
yeah,
back
so the
was
first
the
attempts
60s.
in other states, sort of the interest in bringing that back,
Okay.
started in the more like 50s.
Okay.
There was the advent of the rocket net, which is
Yep.
a means of capturing flocks of turkeys
Okay.
that made translocation more feasible.
Hmm.
Other states started doing this. And yeah, it was 1969 that in New Hampshire the first attempt was made. Um, this was with a flock of birds that were captured and translocated from West Virginia,
West Virginia.
and
Right.
that was in
Okay.
exchange
Yeah.
for 2025 fisher that are native to New Hampshire that
Ah.
we sent down to West Virginia
Oh,
as
that's
part of
neat.
similar reintroduction efforts that West Virginia was focused on at the time. We
Okay.
provided them fisher.
Yeah.
We got a we got a
Huh.
flock of turkeys. Those turkeys were reintroduced to Pawtuckaway State Forest. Unfortunately, due to a
Hmm.
very severe winter storm, that
Oh.
that following winter, there was that population, that
Eh,
flock didn't take hold. There was a
okay.
lot of winter mortality as a result. And then another attempt was made in 1975. Those
Okay.
birds came from western New York.
Hmm.
They were reintroduced to released in Walpole at a farm in Walpole, and
Okay.
that population took hold and survived and thrived.
So did it? So it was a period of what, 20 year, over a period of 20 years or so, that they were kind of really continuing to increase in population, and well, I guess ever since then
Yeah,
they've been increasing. Sounds like.
yeah. So that initial flock slowly began to grow, and over the
Yeah.
next 20 years, there were something like 15 or 20 additional capture and relocation efforts out of that original nucleus of birds
Okay.
in southwest New Hampshire to accelerate the growth and distribution of birds across the state. So
Hmm.
catch them in Walpole, bring them up
Yeah.
to the lakes region, and let a flock go. Bring some to the southeast and let them go. And similar efforts were happening in Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine.
Okay.
So those combined efforts is really what accelerated the repopulation of turkeys
Hmm.
during that period. Yeah, so through the next kind of 20 years or so after that first one.
So has development, over the years, kind of impacted the population as we've, I mean, the state continues to grow. Has that, has that impacted them at all, or
Yeah,
housing developments and stuff like that?
yeah,
Like,
certainly affects the dynamics of the population.
yeah,
Turkey are, I mean, they're highly adaptive and they're
oh
resilient.
yeah,
So we see some of our highest turkey densities actually in some of those more developed
yeah,
parts of the state
yeah,
where there's less hunting pressure. There's perhaps impacts on predation as well,
mm-hmm,
and some of that disturbance creates
mm-hmm,
good turkey cover and turkey habitat. So
mm-hmm,
so yeah,
yeah.
they're certainly being impacted, but
So, which parts of the state have kind of a bigger population? Are there regions that have more turkeys than others here in New Hampshire, or do
yes,
you know?
yeah. So turkey density exists sort of on a gradient from high to low,
Okay.
starting south and going north, and that's going to be associated with habitat quality as well as winter
Mm-hmm.
severity, which
Mm-hmm.
are the two primary environmental components that are going to drive turkey abundance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Turkey, in the spring and summer, rely on natural openings during poult rearing.
Mm-hmm.
Feeding on insects are
Mm-hmm.
primary food source. So the
Mm-hmm.
existence of those fields in some agriculture is important. In the fall, they're highly reliant on hard masts such as
Yeah.
acorns and beech nuts. You see, more oak and beech
Mm-hmm.
in southern New Hampshire than north. So
Mm-hmm.
there's those gradients. And then,
Yeah.
of course, turkeys are a ground feeding species primarily. So deep snow cover for extended periods is going to impact winter survival, if not for some supplemental feed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you see, as a result of that, fewer turkeys, lower turkey densities in northern New Hampshire. Although there
Mm.
certainly
Right.
is
Yeah.
a sustainable,
Well, I've noticed that.
population
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
northern New Hampshire.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a little more. They exist up north, a little more in pockets, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily Connecticut River Valley, where there is
Okay.
that agriculture,
Yeah.
and then you see them where supplemental feed is available as well.
Mm-hmm. And can the different types of turkeys? Can you talk a little bit about that, or
Yeah.
subspecies of
Yeah.
turkeys? What do we
So
have here?
Yeah, so we've got the eastern wild turkey. They're
Oh,
the most prolific of the five
okay.
subspecies, and they're the primary turkey you're going to see pretty much east of the Mississippi.
Okay.
Um, there
Hmm.
is a different subspecies that exists in Florida, the Osceola turkey, and then there's
Oh.
three other subspecies west of the Mississippi. I mean, they're all very similar,
Hmm.
but some subtle differences in coloration
Hmm.
and size
Hmm.
and the like.
So this one that we have behind us here is the
Yep.
similar to what we would see here in New Hampshire.
Yep,
This, yeah,
yep.
yeah,
More than likely harvested
yeah,
here in the state of New Hampshire, but yes, this
yeah,
is
yeah.
a male,
I mean, yeah.
mature male
And
wild
what's
turkey.
what is the their breeding season?
Yeah,
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I didn't think. I mean, we're in fall, and I didn't think that they were. Well, you can talk about it, and then I'll explain why I'm asking a
yeah,
question.
yeah. So breeding occurs in the springtime.
This is okay.
It starts perhaps as early as late March, but it's
Okay.
really the month of April where you see the majority of of breeding going on with
Hmm.
breeding activity persists through the month of May,
Okay.
but likely peaks in April. We see most nest initiation occurring in early May, which so
Okay.
you can kind of back calculate that to suggest that mid to late April is when the majority of breeding's occurring.
Okay. Well, the reason I was asking about that is because I mentioned on my way here there were I had to stop for some turkeys in the road, and so there were a couple of males who were kind of putting on a show, and it seemed a couple of females were not too interested, but it's not it's not mating season. So
Yeah,
what is that all about? Do they
they're not.
year round fluff out their feathers and
Yeah,
show off?
you'll periodically see what's likely a display of dominance as
Okay,
they're
so
working
that's all it is. Okay.
through their pecking order,
Yeah.
and then sometimes in the fall, it's photo period or day length that triggers a lot of their breeding activities,
Okay.
including strutting and gobbling. So
Yeah.
there's is a period of
Okay.
time in the fall where day length photo period is the same as it is in the spring. So sometimes you end up with a confused bird that's gobbling in the fall
Oh,
as a
okay.
result of that.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so
Yeah,
that
but
might be what.
they aren't actively breeding or nesting or any of the like
Right.
this.
Okay. Okay. And as far as the hunting, see what can you talk about hunting season here in New Hampshire?
Yeah, so the
So,
premier season for turkey hunting is in the springtime.
mm-hmm,
Um, the timing of the season is set to ensure that we aren't negatively impacting that breeding activity,
mm-hmm,
um, that would impact the potential population growth trajectory in the future. The hunting season in New Hampshire is the month of May,
mm-hmm,
and again that timing is most hens are now on their nest at that period. So the removal of
mm-hmm,
males during that period isn't a
mm-hmm,
removal of breeding opportunity. So month of May, it's gobblers only
mm-hmm,
or bearded birds are only. There is the
mm-hmm,
occasional hen that has a beard,
mm-hmm.
and you are allowed to harvest that bird, but
Okay.
male only primarily. Um,
Mm-hmm. Do you feel so? The state has a pretty good management plan for the turkeys now that we will be able to kind of sustain the population going continuing on for years to come, or are there efforts to kind of look at what we're doing and just to make sure that it remains and we don't end up you know having issues like we did in the 1800s, which obviously it wouldn't replay itself that way. But I'm
right.
just curious if what the management plan we have now is sufficient.
So turkey hunting is very closely managed.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of my position within the
Okay.
department is sort of we work as a team, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
sort of being the lead on and being most up to date on the different metrics that we use for measuring the populations annually. So we're
Mm-hmm.
measuring monitoring those populations,
Okay.
their ups and downs, and then
Yeah.
making management recommendations to ensure that we aren't negatively impacting population growth potential while balancing
Mm-hmm.
um, interests both on the hunting side of things, the
Mm-hmm.
wildlife viewing side of things, and
Hmm.
there's a publicly owned resource that we're interested with managing. So kind of
Okay.
taking all those
Yeah.
variables as well as of course this um, sustainable
Mm-hmm.
maintaining a sustainable population as well.
And as far as like aggressiveness, how aggressive can they be? I mean, we've seen the stories of turkeys pecking on tires and many years ago, well, this was in the 90s when I was editor at the Exeter newsletter. There was a situation where there was a woman in Stratham who was out hanging up her laundry and on the clothesline, and she had had a turkey come along, a male turkey he was very threatening to her. So she took a sheet, threw it over the turkey, ran inside the house, running for dear life. And then a man was coming along on his bike, and he was kind of gobbling at the turkey, and he didn't like that. So then he went after him, and he took off on his bike and had to flee the scene. So I mean, they can kind of be a little bit aggressive.
Yeah,
But I don't know. Throwing the sheet on, maybe that wasn't the maybe that was the wrong approach.
yeah,
I don't know.
particularly in urban environments or places where they're being supplementally fed, where they
Yeah.
acclimate their natural response to the presence of humans is going to be flight, of course.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah, when they get too comfortable in particularly in urban environments or suburban and more developed environments, habituating to humans, they
yeah.
can get a little ornery.
Well, and there were some females around too,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that probably was, yeah, a
yeah,
factor in the aggressiveness.
yeah. We get the occasional call,
Uh,
but I think reestablishing your dominance,
yeah,
standing your ground, making yourself look big, waving your hands, making noise is generally enough to discourage that kind of
usually,
behavior,
yeah,
especially in combination with removing whatever reason that bird's there
yeah,
in the first
yeah,
which is likely an artificial
yeah.
food source.
What are some of the calls you get, complaints about wild turkeys? Do you get many, or
No,
no?
not too many.
No, okay.
I mean, yeah, of course, everybody's got a slightly different level of tolerance for sharing the landscape with
Yeah.
turkeys. Some people love them, some people hate them just because they exist and are on their lawn, maybe scratching at their garden or something like that.
Oh,
So,
okay. So they're damaging
yeah,
garden and stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So you get some calls like that, but I mean, they're
What?
generally a unappreciated species. So
So what do you do? I mean, so what do you do about that? I mean, if someone calls and says there's a turkey, ruining my garden, what do you? Is there anything you can even do? Or, I mean,
it can be
it's
tricky,
just
but
kind of
it's kind of it's a combination of removing the attractant and making that bird uncomfortable with being there in the first place. So
okay.
hazing plus removal of the attractant, the birds are only going to be there because they're food motivated. So if you
Mm-hmm.
remove that motivation and then you make their continued presence there as uncomfortable as possible,
Mm-hmm.
generally that combination is enough to move them along. But
Mm.
it's not always an easy answer. Maybe it's the neighbor that's feeding and they enjoy
Yeah.
feeding the birds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and there's not much you can do about that. So
Mm-hmm.
it can be challenging at times.
Yeah. I mean, my only complaint has been when they're doing, like, in the backyard, making dust, having dust baths, and kind of stirring up the dust,
Yeah,
making a mess there. That's I don't know if that's common. I guess it must be a common thing that they
yeah,
that
pretty
they do.
common.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's fine. It is New Hampshire. I mean, we have wildlife, and um, how going back to hunting, how many turkeys? What are we allowed? Do you know the numbers, and
Yeah,
what's allowed
so the
for?
bag limit is two turkeys a year.
Okay.
And it's sort of regulated by region. So areas of the state where you have a more robust turkey populations,
Hmm.
primarily southern New Hampshire, you're allowed to harvest two birds in the springtime, the
Okay.
gobblers,
Hmm.
or you can harvest statewide one gobbler in the springtime and one during the fall season. So there's a long fall archery season as well that's either sex um, statewide. So you can either two in the fall in some areas of the state, or
Hmm.
two in the spring in some areas of the state, or statewide one in the spring and then one in the fall.
Hmm. You personally, how often do you see them? I mean, I feel like I see them in my neighborhood. I don't know, every other day. It seems like they're around. Do you
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
see? I
I've
mean,
got a
got a
45-minute drive down Route 10, and I see the same
really?
couple flocks
Yeah.
a couple times a week, most days.
So through the winter months, what do they do during the winter? They're still just out there, or do
Yeah, they're still out there.
they don't go south?
No,
uh,
no, they're still
they're
around.
not
They're
that
still
smart.
out there. They're not using as much of the landscape. They usually
Hmm.
will hone in on some some sort of habitat combination that provides both shelter, roosting habitat, as well as some sort of food source. So you
Mm.
see flocks merge. So
Mm.
in the summertime, it may be one or two or three adult hens with their brood
Mm.
that was born that spring.
Mm.
Those those broods merge and create larger flocks.
Hmm.
Some of the males join in as well, and
Okay.
depending on the quality of the food source. So yeah, they're flocks
Hmm.
flocks emerging. You might see as many as 50, 60 birds in some cases all together,
Really?
using a food source.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, these days it's a lot of supplemental feeding, backyard bird feeders and the like, or
Hmm.
Southwest New Hampshire and Connecticut River Valley. It's
Hmm.
agricultural areas
Hmm.
um, where they're able to continue to get some access to food on the ground despite
Hmm.
winter cover.
And as far as like turkeys being, turkey strikes, vehicles hitting turkeys, do you get many reports of that, or you might not necessarily get that? I guess
Yeah,
that's,
we
I
don't
mean,
always get
you
the
you
we don't
wouldn't
always
you
get
wouldn't
that.
hear it. Yeah, yeah, but
It certainly
it does
happens, but
happen.
it's not at a rate where it's having population loss.
Well, and I can say from personal experience, my wife, she's had many encounters with deer, almost hit a pig, and she hit and an owl, unfortunately, but she did hit a turkey once on Route 125 and in Brentwood, and it did damage to the car. It did damage to the car. So even though I mean, when you're going fast and you hit one of these things, they
Oh yeah.
can cause some headaches for
Mhm.
your vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but you don't. Yeah, I guess we have no stats on.
It's not something we quantify.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, and how does New Hampshire's population compare to other New England states? Do you know what Are we is the populations as you know extensive there in I don't know, Vermont, say, or Maine? Of course, they're bigger states, so Maine would probably have, I don't know what their population looks like, but
Yeah, again, so
I
it's
mean it's
I mean, it's very habitat dependent.
yeah.
So I mean, all New England states certainly have healthy and
Mm,
relatively robust turkey populations with densities likely similar to New
mm,
Hampshire's,
okay.
but with latitudinal variation depending on habitat and
Mm,
climate. Of course, I mean, looking at Maine, for example, a huge amount of Maine's land area is pretty darn far north,
mm,
and it's primarily made up of conifer, spruce
mm,
and fir and the like. That doesn't necessarily represent great turkey habitat. So,
mm,
but
okay.
southern Maine is very
Mm-hmm.
similar to southern New Hampshire,
Mm,
Massachusetts. Parts of you see a little more agriculture in Vermont, and you see some turkey population response associated with that. So,
mm-hmm.
I'd wager to bet that parts of Vermont have greater densities.
Mm,
But I
okay.
don't have all the numbers off the
Yeah,
top of my
yeah,
head.
no, that's okay. And just and at nighttime, they seem to like fly up into the trees and sleep out of the way so they don't get eaten in the night. Is that pretty much kind of
Yeah,
their way of keep staying alive? Yeah.
yep. They
Okay.
roost and
Yeah.
up in
Okay.
mature trees at night.
And then when they come down, that can be quite. It's kind of like an airfield when you have one after another, which I've had that on the road, driving down the road, and all of a sudden one, they're coming out of the
Yeah,
trees,
can be
flying in
quite a
front of you.
show.
It is, yeah, yeah, a little kind of scary, actually. Actually,
Yep.
but yeah. Dan, is there anything else that you feel is important to mention about turkeys? Any other fun facts that people might find interesting, or anything else you think is yeah, worth mentioning before we kind of wrap things up and go and eat turkey soon? uh,
I think that pretty
yeah,
much covers it. I guess
it's
I could mention that we're gearing up for implementing a turkey research program over the next 3 years,
oh,
starting this winter, where we'll be live capturing and leg banding turkeys across the state
mm-hmm.
during the winter months, and then we're going to be tracking the recovery of those leg bands
Oh,
during the
okay,
harvest season
mm-hmm.
to start to quantify the percent of the male population that's being harvested annually
Mm.
and how that may vary regionally, which will just inform some of our management decision
Mm-hmm.
making, and some of that data will help to validate some of the indices we use to do a better job at quantifying some of those turkey population trends over time. So that's something
Okay,
we're
it's interesting.
something
Yeah,
we're excited about, and
yep.
we're partnering with the National Wild Turkey Federation on
Mm.
that, who's a conservation organization who's heavily
Mm-hmm.
invested in turkey conservation and
Great.
research and habitat work. So that
Mm.
going to be working with volunteers on the ground, and
Mm-hmm.
also have a research grant provided by them. So
Mm-hmm.
excited for that
Yeah.
collaboration
Mm.
and see what we can learn from that.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you all for being with me. Until next time, remember, every person and every place has a story to tell. We'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to Grounded in Granite, where we celebrate the people, places, and stories that make New Hampshire home. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow Grounded in Granite on Facebook, X, TikTok, and Instagram for behind-the-scenes clips, photos, and more. You can also subscribe to the Grounded in Granite YouTube channel to catch full video episodes, and don't forget to follow on Spotify so you don't miss the next conversation. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and stay grounded in granite.